My rancher husband stole $50,000 from our family for 18 years. So I destroyed his secret world with one devastating discovery. I thought I was sending money to help his sick sister, but when I found that silver locket hidden in his chest, everything changed. So I rode 3 days through dangerous desert to confront the woman who had been living off my children's future. They never expected I would uncover their elaborate deception, or that I possessed the power to turn their betrayal into my greatest victory. Now his mistress begs me for mercy, but I'm the one who controls both their fates, and they'll never see it coming. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was living a double life behind your back? What would you do if you found out your spouse had been secretly supporting another family for decades while your own children went without? I chose a path that shocked everyone. Tell me in the comments, would you have confronted the other woman or walked away forever? I'm Catherine Whitehorse, a 45-year-old Navajo woman who built a ranching empire in 1885 New Mexico through strength, wisdom, and the ability to weave truth from lies. The desert dawn was painting the mesas red when I settled at my loom that September morning in 1885. My fingers moved through the wool threads with practiced ease, weaving patterns my grandmother had taught me as a child. The geometric designs told stories of rain and wind, of the harmony between earth and sky that my people understood long before the first Anglo settlers arrived in this territory. But this morning, something felt different. The threads seemed to resist my touch, and the pattern that usually flowed like water from my hands looked somehow broken. My grandmother always said the loom reflected the weaver's heart, that troubled spirits created troubled patterns. From the corral, I could hear Sam moving among the horses, his spurs jingling as he prepared for another cattle drive. At 62, he still sat a horse like a man half his age, his weathered hands sure on the reins. We'd built this ranch together over 23 years of marriage, carving a life from the unforgiving New Mexico desert through drought and plenty, through Apache raids and territorial disputes. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen where our hired hand Miguel was preparing breakfast for the drive. Soon, Sam would be gone for 2 weeks, maybe 3, driving our cattle to market in Colorado. It was the pattern of our life, his departures and returns marking the seasons like the migration of birds. Kate, Sam called, using the name he'd given me when we wed, saying Catherine was too formal for a rancher's wife. You seen my good chaps anywhere? The ones with the silver conchos? Hanging in the tack room where they always are, I replied without looking up from my weaving. The morning light caught the silver threads I'd woven into the pattern, a technique that made my blankets sought after at trading posts from Santa Fe to El Paso. Sam appeared in the doorway, his hat clutched in his hands. Those brown eyes that had charmed me so many years ago now seemed to dart everywhere except to my face. In 23 years of marriage, Sam had never been afraid to look at me. Until recently. Kate, before I head out, I need to set aside some money, he said, his voice carrying a tension I'd begun to notice more often. For my sister Elena. Her consumption's gotten worse, and the doctor in El Paso says she needs special medicines. I paused in my weaving, my hands stilling on the threads. Elena. Always Elena. For 15 years, Sam had faithfully sent money to his sister who lived somewhere near the border. $50 every month, money that could have improved our ranch, bought better breeding stock, or helped our children establish themselves. How much this time? I asked, though I already knew the answer would strain our resources. $50, Sam said quickly, then added, I know it seems like a lot, but she's family Kate. She's got nobody else since her husband died. You understand family obligations better than anyone. I did understand. In my grandmother's teaching, family was everything, the bonds that held the world together when the winds of hardship threatened to scatter all you'd built. But something in Sam's manner troubled me, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the nervous way he turned his hat in his hands. Where exactly does Elena live? I asked, a question that had never occurred to me before. You've never said precisely. Sam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Down near the border, small place called Mesilla, nothing much there but desert and memories. He moved toward the door, clearly wanting to end the conversation. I'll be back in 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we have trouble with strays. As he walked away, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. When Sam spoke of Elena, he never used the words, my sister. He always said Elena, or she, or her, but never claimed the relationship directly. It was a small thing, perhaps meaningless, but it lodged in my mind like a cactus thorn. I returned to my weaving, but the peaceful rhythm of the morning had been shattered. The threads seemed to tangle under my fingers, and the pattern that had been emerging so clearly now looked confused, unbalanced. From outside came the sound of Sam loading his saddlebags, the creak of leather and jingle of silver. Soon he would ride out with the men following trails worn smooth by countless herds. But this time I found myself wondering about the money he carried, about the sister I'd never met, about the secrets that might lie hidden in the spaces between his words. 3 days after Sam left with the cattle drive, I found myself standing in the kitchen before dawn, grinding corn for the morning meal, just as my Navajo grandmother had taught me. The rhythmic sound of stone against stone was soothing, a connection to the old ways that helped quiet the restless thoughts that had plagued me since our conversation about Elena. "Morning, Mama," came James's voice from the doorway. At 32, my eldest son had his father's height, but my people's quiet way of moving. He'd been helping manage the ranch since he was old enough to sit a horse, and his steady presence had become even more valuable as Sam's absences grew longer and more frequent. "The horses in the north pasture need checking," I said, handing him a cup of coffee. "That new stallion's been testing the fence lines." James nodded, accepting both the coffee and the responsibility without question. "Mary Rose rode over yesterday evening. Said she'll be by this morning to help with the preserving. Thomas is already out checking the water holes, thinks we might have a dry spell coming." My heart swelled with pride at how my children had grown into capable adults. Mary Rose, now 28, taught at the territorial school in Esperanza 3 days a week, and helped me manage the household accounts. Thomas, 24, had inherited my father's gift with horses, and could gentle the wildest Mustang with patience and understanding rather than force. "Where's little Beatrice?" I asked, referring to my youngest born 7 years ago when I'd thought my childbearing days were over. "Still sleeping. She was up late last night working on that reading primer Mary Rose brought her." As if summoned by our conversation, my youngest daughter appeared in the doorway, her dark hair tousled from sleep, clutching the worn book to her chest. She had inherited the best of both her heritages, my mother's quick intelligence and Sam's stubborn determination. "Mama, can you help me with the hard words?" she asked, climbing onto my lap as I sat at the kitchen table. I opened the primer and began helping her sound out the letters, but my mind kept drifting to Sam's nervous behavior before he left. In the early years of our marriage, he would kiss me goodbye with genuine affection, promising to hurry back. Lately, his departures felt more like escapes. "Mama, you're not listening," Beatrice complained, and I realized she was right. "I'm sorry, little one. Let's try this word again." Mary Rose arrived as the sun climbed higher, her saddlebags loaded with glass jars for preserving the late summer fruit. She had her father's brown eyes, but my mother's wisdom, and I'd noticed her watching me with concern over the past few weeks. "You've seemed troubled lately, Mama," she said as we worked side by side, cutting peaches into neat slices. "Is everything all right between you and Papa?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. How could I explain the growing sense that something fundamental had shifted in my marriage, that the man I'd loved and trusted for over 2 decades suddenly felt like a stranger? "Marriage has its seasons," I said, finally choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes winter comes when you're not expecting it." Mary Rose's hands stilled on her knife. "Is Papa in some kind of trouble?" Before I could answer, Thomas burst through the kitchen door, his face flushed with excitement and concern. "Mama, you need to see this. Found it caught on the fence wire near Devil's Canyon." He held up a piece of fabric, fine cotton with delicate embroidery, the kind of needlework done by skilled Mexican seamstresses. It was torn as if ripped from a dress or shawl in haste. "This isn't from anyone in Esperanza," Mary Rose said, examining the cloth. "The stitching is too fine, too expensive." I took the fabric in my hands, feeling the quality of the weave, noting the intricate pattern of roses and vines worked in silk thread. This was the kind of clothing worn by women of means, not the simple cotton and wool that frontier wives like myself could afford. "Where exactly did you find this?" I asked Thomas. "About 2 miles south, near the old trading trail that leads toward the border." Looked like it had been there a while, maybe caught in the last big wind. The border, where Elena lived, where Sam claimed to have a sick sister who needed expensive medicines. I folded the delicate fabric carefully and placed it in my apron pocket, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The next Saturday, I rode into Esperanza for market day, the mysterious fabric tucked safely in my saddlebag alongside the practical items I needed: salt, coffee, and ammunition for Thomas's rifle. The morning air carried the familiar scents of piñon smoke and fresh tortillas from the Mexican quarter mixing with the leather and horse smells from the Anglo section of town. Our little border community had grown around the old Spanish mission, a place where three cultures met and mingled like streams flowing together in the desert. Mexican vaqueros in silver-studded chaps traded stories with Navajo families bringing blankets and jewelry, while Anglo settlers like myself sought supplies and news from the outside world. I guided Luna through the dusty main street, past the whitewashed adobe buildings that housed Martinez's general store, the territorial courthouse, and Father Miguel's church. The weekly market drew people from ranches 50 miles in every direction, and I hoped someone might have information about the fabric I'd found. At Kowalski's trading post, I hitched Luna to the rail and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar mixture of coffee, tobacco, and dried chilies. Old Henrik Kowalski looked up from his ledger, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Mrs. Whitehorse, haven't seen you since the spring roundup. How's that husband of yours?" "Off driving cattle to Colorado?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I pulled the fabric from my bag and laid it on the counter. "Henrik, I found this near my property. Ever seen work like this before?" Henrik's bushy eyebrows shot up as he examined the delicate embroidery. "This is fine work, very fine. Mexican seamstress, I'd say, but not local. This kind of silk thread, this quality, you'd find it in El Paso, maybe Santa Fe. Expensive." "Any idea who might wear such things around here?" Henrik scratched his grizzled chin thoughtfully. "Well, there's the banker's wife in Las Cruces, but she's Anglo, wouldn't wear Mexican-style embroidery. Could be someone passing through, maybe someone with money to spend on finery." Before I could ask more questions, a familiar voice spoke up in rapid Spanish from behind me. I turned to see Maria Santos, the priest's sister, talking to another Mexican woman I didn't recognize. My grandmother had taught me enough Spanish to understand most conversations, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "La mujer del cantinero vive con el gringo casado. Muchos años ya. The cantina woman lives with the married Anglo. Many years now." Maria noticed me listening and switched to English, her dark eyes filled with something that looked like pity. "Señora Catherine, forgive me. I did not know you were here." "Maria," I said, stepping closer, my heart pounding like a war drum. "Were you speaking of someone I might know?" The two women exchanged glances, and I saw Maria's companion shake her head slightly, a warning gesture that made my stomach clench with dread. "Señora," Maria said carefully, "there are some stones better left unturned, some truths that bring only pain. Please, Maria, I found this fabric near my ranch." I held up the embroidered cloth. "I need to know if it belongs to someone local." The silence that followed was deafening. Henrik had stopped pretending to work on his ledger. Other customers had grown quiet, sensing the tension in the air like animals before a storm. Finally, Maria's companion spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "That looks like the kind of thing Elena Morales might wear. She runs a cantina in Mesilla, has for many years. She has expensive tastes for a woman in her position." "Elena Morales," I repeated, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "And this cantina, does she live there alone?" "No, señora. She has a daughter, maybe 16 years old now, pretty girl with light eyes." The woman paused, then added reluctantly, "Light eyes like some of the Anglo men who visit the cantina regularly." The trading post seemed to tilt around me like a ship in rough seas. Light eyes, like Sam's eyes, like the eyes of my own children. "How long has she been in Mesilla?" I managed to ask. 17, maybe 18 years now," Maria said gently. "Since before the girl was born." 18 years. Sam and I had been married 23 years, which meant he'd known Elena Morales almost from the beginning of our marriage, before James was born, before any of our children existed. I thanked them with words that felt like stones in my mouth and walked outside into the blazing desert sun. Around me, the normal sounds of market day continued: children laughing, vendors calling their wares horses, stamping and snorting, but it all seemed to come from very far away. A cantina woman named Elena Morales, a daughter with light eyes, expensive clothes that somehow ended up near my ranch. I climbed into my saddle with hands that shook like autumn leaves, and as I rode home through the desert heat, one thought burned in my mind clearer than the New Mexico sun: I was going to Mesilla. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, I found myself standing in the bedroom I'd shared with Sam for over 2 decades, staring at his oak chest like it held the answers to questions I was afraid to ask. The moonlight streaming through the window cast long shadows across the room, and I could hear the desert wind rattling the shutters like restless spirits. My hands trembled as I lifted the heavy lid. Inside were Sam's winter clothes, his good Sunday shirt, and a leather portfolio where he kept important papers. I'd never had reason to search through his belongings before. Trust had been the foundation of our marriage, or so I'd believed. Beneath a stack of cattle sale receipts, my fingers found something that made my heart stop. A small wooden box carved with roses and vines in the same style as the embroidery on the fabric I'd found. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a silver locket on a delicate chain. I opened the locket with shaking hands. On one side was a photograph of a young Mexican woman with intelligent dark eyes and a proud smile. On the other side was a picture of a little girl, perhaps 5 years old, with Sam's unmistakable brown-green eyes and his stubborn chin. Elena and her daughter, the family Sam had been supporting for 18 years while I raised our children on what was left of his earnings. "Mama?" I spun around to find Mary Rose in the doorway, her face creased with concern. "I heard you moving around. Are you all right?" I quickly closed the locket and slipped it into my apron pocket, but not before Mary Rose saw the wooden box in my hands. "What is that?" she asked, stepping closer. There was no point in lying to my daughter. She had her father's eyes, but my mother's wisdom, and she would see through any deception I attempted. "Evidence," I said, simply showing her the locket. "Evidence that your father has been living a lie for most of our marriage." Mary Rose examined the photographs with the careful attention of a teacher studying a difficult text. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and sadness that mirrored my own feelings. "How long have you suspected?" she asked. "Only recently. Since he left for the cattle drive, things haven't felt right. And now this." I gestured helplessly at the locket. "What are you going to do?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a dying fire. What was I going to do? Confront Sam when he returned? Pretend I'd never found the evidence? Accept that my marriage had been built on lies and try to continue as if nothing had changed? "I'm going to Mesilla," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I'm going to find this Elena Morales and learn the truth." Mary Rose's face went pale. "Mama, that's a dangerous journey for a woman alone. The borderlands are full of rough men, and Mesilla, it's not a place for respectable women." "I can't live with these questions eating at me like cancer," I replied. "I need to know the truth, all of it." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. You have your teaching responsibilities, and someone needs to stay here with Beatrice and help James manage the ranch." Mary Rose was quiet for a moment, then said, "You should talk to Uncle Joseph before you make any final decisions. He knows the old trails, the safe places to stop, and he'll give you guidance that comes from wisdom, not just anger." She was right, of course. Uncle Joseph Running Bear had always been my spiritual compass when difficult decisions needed to be made. His counsel had helped me navigate the challenges of living between 2 cultures, and I would need that wisdom now more than ever. "Will you help me prepare for the journey?" I asked. Mary Rose nodded, though worry creased her features. "I'll pack supplies and make sure Luna is ready for desert travel, but Mama, promise me you'll be careful. Whatever you find in Mesilla, whatever truth you discover, remember that you have a family here who loves you and needs you to come home." I embraced my daughter, drawing strength from her solid presence and her faith in me. "I promise," I whispered. "But I also promise that when I return, this family will be built on truth, not lies." Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, its voice carrying across the desert like a warning. Tomorrow I would ride to Uncle Joseph's hogan and seek the guidance of my ancestors. Then, armed with wisdom and determination, I would set out for Mesilla to confront the woman who had shared my husband's heart for 18 years. The time for comfortable lies was over. It was time for painful truths. The next morning, as the first light of dawn touched the eastern mesas, I rode to Uncle Joseph's hogan in the foothills beyond our ranch. The traditional 8-sided dwelling sat in a grove of ancient cottonwoods built according to the old ways, with the door facing east to greet each new day with proper respect. Smoke curled from the smoke hole at the top, carrying the sacred scents of sage and sweetgrass. As I approached, leading Luna by the reins, I could hear Uncle Joseph's voice speaking softly in Dine Bizad, our people's language, asking the holy people for guidance and protection for the day ahead. "Uncle," I called in Navajo, using the respectful term for my mother's brother, "I need your wisdom." Joseph Running Bear emerged from the hogan, his weathered face immediately showing concern. At 55, he moved with the quiet grace of a man who had spent his life reading the subtle signs of desert and sky. His long gray hair was bound with a strip of red cloth, and he wore the traditional velvet shirt and silver jewelry that marked him as a man of standing among our people. "Little Weaver," he said, using my childhood name, "your spirit is troubled. I felt it on the wind before you arrived. Come sit by the fire and tell me what weighs on your heart." We settled beside his small fire, and I pulled the silver locket from my apron pocket. Uncle Joseph examined the photographs with the careful attention of a man who understood that objects could carry powerful medicine, both good and bad. "This woman," he said, pointing to Elena's picture, "she is not Navajo, not Anglo, Mexican, perhaps." "Yes, her name is Elena Morales, and she lives in Mesilla. Uncle Sam has been sending her money for 18 years, telling me she was his sick sister. But she's not his sister. I struggled to find words for the betrayal. She's the mother of his child." Uncle Joseph was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames, as if reading messages written there by spirits I could not see. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient wisdom. "In the old stories, there is a tale about a woman who discovered her husband had been feeding a skinwalker, thinking it was a hungry relative. The deception had gone on so long that the skinwalker had grown strong while the woman's own children grew thin from lack." I shivered, understanding the metaphor. A skinwalker was a witch, a being that appeared as one thing while being something entirely different, exactly what Sam had become in my eyes. "What did the woman do?" I asked. She had to choose. She could continue feeding the deception, or she could face the truth and drive the skinwalker away. But facing truth always comes with a price, niece. Sometimes the price is higher than we expect to pay. "I have to know the whole truth," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't live with these lies anymore, Uncle. They're poisoning everything: my marriage, my children's future, my own spirit." Uncle Joseph nodded slowly. "Truth is like water in the desert, little Weaver. We need it to live, even when it tastes bitter." He reached into a leather pouch at his belt and withdrew a piece of turquoise set in an old silver pendant. "This belonged to your grandmother. She wore it when she had to make difficult journeys, when she needed protection from those who would deceive her." I took the pendant with trembling hands, feeling the smooth stone warm against my palm. My grandmother had been a strong woman, respected among both the Navajo and the Mexican families who traded with our people. She had taught me that a woman's strength came not from avoiding difficulty, but from walking through it with dignity intact. "The journey to Mesilla is dangerous for a woman alone," Uncle Joseph continued. "There are men who would see you as prey, especially near the border. But there are also good people along the way. Mexican families who remember your grandmother's kindness, Navajo relatives who will offer shelter and guidance." He drew a map in the dirt with a stick, showing me the safe places to stop the water holes that wouldn't run dry, the landmarks that would guide me through the desert maze. "Follow the old trading routes. Stay away from the main roads where the rough men travel. And remember, little Weaver, sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when to walk away from a fight you cannot win." "What if what I find destroys everything I've built?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at me since I'd found the locket. "Then you will rebuild," Uncle Joseph said simply. "That is what our people have always done. We have survived drought and war, removal and return. We endure because we face truth even when it burns like desert sun." I left the ranch before dawn 2 days later, when the desert was still cool and the stars were fading into the pale sky. Luna carried water for 3 days, dried meat, and the few precious items Uncle Joseph had given me: corn pollen for protection, a small bag of healing herbs, and my grandmother's turquoise pendant hanging close to my heart. The first day took me through familiar territory, following cattle trails I'd ridden with Sam and the children over the years. But as the sun climbed higher and the landscape grew more desolate, I entered country I'd never seen before, a harsh land of red rock canyons and thorny desert plants that could tear flesh from bone. By midday, the heat was merciless. I stopped at a hidden spring Uncle Joseph had marked on his dirt map, letting Luna drink while I refilled our water containers. The silence was complete except for the buzz of insects and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. This was country that could kill the unprepared, and I felt the weight of my decision with every mile. On the second day, I encountered the first real danger of my journey. 3 rough-looking men on horseback appeared on the trail ahead, their intentions clear from the way they spread out to block my path. They were the kind of border drifters Uncle Joseph had warned me about, men who lived by taking what they wanted from travelers foolish enough to venture into the borderlands alone. "Well, well," the leader said, his voice carrying the flat accent of a man from back east. "What have we here, pretty lady traveling all alone in dangerous country?" I touched the turquoise pendant through my shirt and felt my grandmother's strength flow into me. "I'm just passing through," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I have nothing of value." "Oh, I think you do," the man replied with a cruel smile. "I think you have plenty to offer 3 lonely men." But before they could move closer, a voice called out in Spanish from the rocks above. "A la gente de Allah, she is under our protection." The 3 men looked up to see 4 Mexican vaqueros with rifles trained on them from the high ground. The leader of my would-be attackers cursed but recognized the hopelessness of his position. "This ain't over," he snarled, but he and his men rode away toward the main road. One of the vaqueros climbed down from the rocks, a young man with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone who worked with horses and cattle. "Señora Catherine Whitehorse?" he asked in accented English. "I am Roberto Herrera. My grandmother, she remember your grandmother with much love. She say if we ever see you on the old trails, we help you." That night, I sheltered with the Herrera family at their small ranch, eating beans and fresh tortillas, while Señora Herrera told stories about my grandmother's kindness during the drought of '79. Their hospitality reminded me that the desert, for all its dangers, was also home to people who understood that survival depended on helping one another. "You travel to dangerous place, Señora," old Señor Herrera warned as I prepared to leave the next morning. "Misilla, it is not good town for respectable woman. Much drinking, much fighting. And the cantinas." He shook his head disapprovingly. "I must find someone there," I replied. "A woman named Elena Morales." The silence that followed told me everything. Even here, 50 miles from Misilla, Elena's reputation was known. "See, I know of her," Señora Herrera said quietly. "She run cantina called La Frontera. But Señora Catherine, some truths are like scorpions, dangerous to handle even when you know they are there." The third day brought me to Mesilla as the sun reached its peak, beating down mercilessly on the dusty plaza. The old town drowsed in the heat, its adobe buildings baking under the relentless sky. Burros dozed in whatever shade they could find, and even the dogs had given up seeking cooler spots. I found Elena's cantina on a side street, recognizable by the painted sign that read La Frontera in faded red letters. The building was larger than I'd expected, 2 stories of weathered adobe with a wooden balcony that had seen better days. Through the open doorway came the sound of guitar music and low conversation in Spanish. My hands shook as I tied Luna to the hitching post. After 3 days of desert travel dust coating every inch of me, I must have looked like a wild woman. But I was here, finally here at the place where 18 years of lies would either be confirmed or explained away. I touched my grandmother's pendant one more time, drawing strength from the smooth turquoise, then pushed through the batwing doors into the cantina's cool shadows, ready to face whatever truth waited inside. The interior of La Frontera was dimly lit after the blazing desert sun, but my eyes quickly adjusted to reveal rough wooden tables, a long bar carved from a single piece of oak, and walls decorated with colorful serapes and tin mirrors that reflected the light from oil lamps. The guitar music stopped as the handful of patrons turned to stare at the dusty Anglo woman who had just walked into their world. Behind the bar stood a woman who could only be Elena Morales. She was perhaps 45, with the kind of beauty that comes from strength rather than softness. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and she wore a white blouse that emphasized her olive skin and the silver jewelry at her throat. But it was her eyes that stopped my breath, intelligent, wary, and filled with a recognition that told me she knew exactly who I was. "Signora Whitehorse," she said in accented English, her voice steady despite the shock I could see in her face. "I have been expecting you for a very long time." The words hung in the air like gun smoke after a shootout. Elena had been expecting me. How long? And why had she never reached out, never tried to contact the wife of the man who had been supporting her for 18 years? "You know who I am," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The other patrons had returned to their drinks, but I could feel their attention like heat from a forge. "Sigh, I know." Elena moved from behind the bar with fluid grace, gesturing toward a small table in the corner away from curious ears. "You are Samuel's wife, the one he speaks of when the tequila makes him remember his other life." His other life. The phrase hit me like a physical blow, but I followed her to the table, my legs somehow still carrying me, despite feeling like they were made of water. 18 years, I said, settling into the rough wooden chair. 18 years I've been sending money to his sick sister. "You're no sister, are you, Elena?" She poured 2 glasses of water from a clay pitcher, her movements deliberate and calm. When she looked up, her dark eyes held a mixture of defiance and something that might have been shame. "No, Signora, I am not his sister. I am the woman who has loved him since I was 17 years old. The woman who bore his daughter and waited for him to choose." His daughter? The words came out as barely a whisper. My hands began to tremble against the rough wooden table. The girl with light eyes that people mentioned. "Sofia," Elena said, and her voice softened with maternal love. "She is 16 now, beautiful and smart, and she asks questions I cannot answer about why her father comes and goes like the desert wind." Before I could respond, footsteps sounded from the back room, and a young woman appeared carrying a tray of clean glasses. She had Sam's eyes, there was no denying it, that particular shade of brown-green that caught the light like water over stones. But she had her mother's graceful movements and proud bearing. "Mama, do you need—" Sofia stopped mid-sentence when she saw me, her eyes widening with a recognition that couldn't be explained by our having met before. "Sofia," Elena said gently, "this is Signora Catherine Whitehorse. She is Samuel's other wife." The girl's face went pale as desert bones. The tray trembled in her hands, and I reached out instinctively to steady it before the glasses crashed to the floor. "His wife," Sofia's voice was barely audible. "But I thought, Mama always said—" "I know, mija," Elena said, her own composure finally cracking. "I know what I said. It was easier than explaining that your father has 2 families, 2 lives, and cannot choose between them." "Cannot or will not?" I asked, surprised by the steel in my own voice. Elena's laugh was bitter as desert sage. "Does it matter? The result is the same. He comes here every few months, stays for a week or 2, promises that soon he will make things right. Then he leaves and we wait, always waiting." I looked at this woman, this other woman who had shared my husband's heart for 18 years, and felt something unexpected stirring in my chest. Not just anger, though that was there too, but recognition. We were both victims of Sam's inability to choose to be honest, to be the man either of us deserved. "When did you last see him?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer from the sadness in both their eyes. 3 months ago, Elena replied quietly. "He was supposed to return last month, but—" She shrugged, a gesture that tried to hide deep pain. "He has not come. No word, no message, no money. Nothing." The silence that followed was heavy with years of deception, broken dreams, and the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. Sofia set down the tray with trembling hands and moved to stand behind her mother's chair, her young face a mask of confusion and hurt. "Is he dead, Signora?" she asked me directly, her voice carrying a strength that reminded me painfully of my own children. "Is that why he hasn't come?" "I don't know," I admitted, looking into eyes that were so achingly familiar. "He left for a cattle drive 3 weeks ago, but I haven't heard from him either. The difference is, I never knew about you, about either of you." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of 18 years of deception. Elena reached up to cover her daughter's hand with her own. And I saw in that gesture the same protective love I had shown my own children countless times. "Tell me," I said, leaning forward. "Tell me how this began. How did Sam convince you he was free to love you?" Elena's dark eyes filled with a pain so deep it seemed to echo in the cantina's shadows. "When I met him, I was 17, working in my family's store here in Mesilla. He was so handsome, so charming, and he told me he was a widower. Said his wife had died in childbirth back in Colorado, that he'd come to New Mexico to start over." My heart clenched at the elaborate nature of the lie, not just hidden from me, but built on the fictional death of a woman who was very much alive. "He courted me for months," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "Brought me flowers, small gifts, promised we would marry as soon as he could settle his affairs. When I became pregnant with Sofia, he said we couldn't have a church wedding yet because of legal complications with his dead wife's estate." Sofia's grip tightened on her mother's shoulder. "You told me Papa couldn't marry you because of the law," she said, her young voice cracking. "You said the government wouldn't recognize marriages between Mexicans and Anglos." "I told you many things, mija," Elena said softly, "because the truth was too painful for a child to bear." "And the money?" I asked. "The $50 every month?" "He said it was for our future," Elena replied. "That he was saving money to buy land to build us a proper house away from the cantina. He said once his legal troubles were resolved, we would be a real family." I felt sick thinking of all the times Sam had looked me in the eye and spoken of his sick sister, all the times I had felt guilty for resenting the money that went to Elena while my own children wore patched clothes and went without. "How long did you believe him?" I asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. "Too long. Maybe I knew the truth years ago, but I didn't want to see it. When you love someone, when you have their child, you make yourself believe their promises even when your heart knows better." Sofia suddenly spoke up, her voice fierce with the anger of youth. "I stopped believing when I turned 14. I started asking questions. Why didn't we ever visit his family? Why couldn't I meet my grandparents? Why did he always leave so suddenly?" She looked directly at me. "Mama said his family lived far away, but I knew there was more. I could see it in her eyes." "What did you suspect?" I asked gently. "That he had another family?" Sofia said simply. "That we were his secret, not his real life." Tears began to flow down her cheeks. "But I never imagined his other family didn't know about us either." Elena stood abruptly and moved to the window, staring out at the dusty street. 3 months ago, when he was here last, something was different. He was nervous, distracted. He kept talking about how complicated his life had become, how he didn't know how much longer he could keep. She turned back to us. "Keep living this way." "Did he say anything specific?" I pressed. "He said his wife was asking questions. That she was suspicious about the money?" Elena's eyes met mine across the dim cantina. "He said he might have to choose soon and he didn't know how." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sam had been planning to abandon one of his families, and from his nervous behavior before leaving on the cattle drive, I suspected I knew which one he'd chosen to keep. "But he never came back to either of us," I said quietly. "No," Elena agreed. "He disappeared rather than choose. Left us both wondering, both waiting, both hoping for answers that may never come." I looked at these two women, the other family that my husband had created and then abandoned, just as he had abandoned us, and felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it was no longer directed at them. They were not my enemies. They were fellow victims of a man who had never learned to be honest even with himself. The three of us sat in that cantina as the afternoon shadows lengthened, 3 women bound together by one man's web of lies. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the windows and stirring dust devils in the plaza. Inside, we were creating something new from the wreckage of our separate sorrows. "I came here angry," I admitted, breaking the silence that had settled over us like a heavy blanket. "I wanted to confront the woman who had been taking money that should have gone to my children. I wanted justice." Elena's eyes flashed with the first spark of defiance I'd seen from her. "And what justice would that be? Senora, should I apologize for loving a man who promised to marry me? For believing his lies about being a widower? For raising his daughter alone while he played husband to you?" Sophia's hand tightened on her mother's shoulder, and I saw in her young face the same protective instinct I'd felt countless times with my own children. "No," I said quietly, feeling my grandmother's wisdom flowing through me like cool water. "The justice I want is not against you, Elena. It's for all of us." I reached into my travel bag and pulled out one of my grandmother's weavings, a small piece but beautiful with traditional patterns that told stories of resilience and renewal. I placed it on the table between us. In my grandmother's teaching, when someone has been wronged, the healing comes not from punishment, but from making things right. Sam wronged all of us, but he's not here to face that wrong, so we must decide what right looks like. Elena touched the weaving with reverent fingers. "It's beautiful, but I don't understand." "You said he hasn't sent money for 3 months," I continued. "Your cantina is struggling, isn't it? And Sofia should be in a proper school learning skills that will give her choices beyond this place?" Sofia lifted her chin proudly. "I can read, Señora. Mama taught me both Spanish and English." "I'm sure she did," I said gently. "But you deserve more opportunities than Messia can offer." Elena's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you proposing?" "Come back with me." I said the words surprising even myself as they left my mouth. "To New Mexico. I have a ranch that's more than I can manage alone with my husband gone. You have skills, you run a business, you understand people. Sofia could attend the territorial school in Esperanza, maybe even help with the ranch work." The silence stretched between us like a rope bridge over a canyon, fragile, uncertain, but offering passage to something new. "You would do this?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "After everything?" "Sam made us enemies without our knowing it," I replied. "But we don't have to stay enemies. My children have lost their father to his lies. Sofia has never really had one. Maybe together we can build something better than what he left us with." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at my grandmother's weaving as if it held answers in its ancient patterns. Finally, she spoke. "If we did this thing, Señora Catherine, it would not be charity. I will not be your servant, nor will my daughter." "Partners," I said firmly. "The ranch needs 2 strong women to run it properly. And please call me Kate. We're family now, whether Sam intended it or not." Elena's smile was tentative but real. "Kate," she repeated, testing the name. "And you must call me Elena, not Señora Morales. That name carries too much sadness." Sofia suddenly straightened her young voice, clear and strong. "When do we leave?" We spent the rest of that day working out the practical details of our unlikely partnership. Elena proved to have a sharp mind for business, asking pointed questions about the ranch's finances, the size of the operation, and what my children might think of their father's other family suddenly appearing in their lives. "Your eldest son," she said as we sat in her small office behind the cantina. "He is how old?" "James is 32, married with children of his own. He helps manage the ranch." I paused, then added honestly, "He's going to be angry when he learns the truth about his father. They all will be." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "And they have never suspected?" "No, Sam was careful about keeping his 2 lives separate." I watched Sofia through the doorway, packing her few belongings with the excitement of someone finally free to leave a cage. "How will you feel about leaving the only home Sofia has ever known?" "This place was never truly home," Elena replied, following my gaze. "It was a waiting room where we spent 18 years hoping for a life that was never going to come." Over the next 2 hours, Elena demonstrated the practical skills that had kept her cantina running despite Sam's unreliable support. She negotiated the sale of her business to a Mexican family from El Paso, getting a fair price for the building and furniture. She settled accounts with suppliers, paid her few debts, and organized her belongings with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing alone. "You're very good at this," I observed, watching her handle a difficult negotiation with a creditor who tried to claim she owed more than she did. "I had to be," Elena said simply. "Samuel's promises didn't pay bills or put food on the table. I learned early that the only person I could depend on was myself." Sofia appeared with a small wooden trunk and 2 cloth bags. "This is everything, Mama. Everything that matters anyway." I was struck by how little they were taking so few possessions after 18 years of life. It reminded me of my grandmother's teaching that true wealth couldn't be carried in wagons or stored in houses. There's something else we need to discuss, Elena said, her voice taking on a serious tone. The money Samuel sent all these years, I saved what I could. It's not much, maybe $200, but I want to contribute it to the ranch expenses. Elena, that's your security. No, she interrupted firmly. If we're to be partners, then we share both the burdens and the resources. I won't come to your ranch as a charity case. I felt a surge of respect for this woman who had maintained her dignity through years of deception and abandonment. Very well, partners it is. As the sun began to set over Mesilla, painting the adobe buildings gold and red, we made our final preparations. Elena had arranged for a wagon to carry their belongings, and we planned to leave at first light to avoid the worst heat of the desert crossing. Are you nervous? I asked Sofia as she helped her mother close up the cantina for the last time. No, Senora Kate, she replied, using my name with careful respect. I'm excited. For the first time in my life, I feel like we're moving towards something instead of just waiting. That night, as I lay on a cot in Elena's small apartment above the cantina, I thought about the strange turns life could take. Yesterday, I had been a betrayed wife seeking confrontation. Tonight, I was preparing to return home with a new family built not from blood or law, but from shared pain and mutual respect. Sometimes I reflected the most beautiful things grew from the most barren ground. We left Mesilla at dawn, 3 women and a young girl traveling toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The wagon Elena had purchased carried their belongings, a wooden trunk cloth bags, and the silver cross that had belonged to her grandmother. Sofia sat beside her mother on the wagon seat, eyes bright with excitement and nervousness, as she watched the only home she'd ever known disappear behind the dust of our wheels. The journey back to the ranch took 4 days, and with each mile I watched Elena and Sofia discover pieces of the world Sam had hidden from them. Sofia had never seen the vast mesas that rose like ancient temples from the desert floor, had never heard the haunting call of coyotes at dawn, had never tasted water from a natural spring hidden in red rock canyons. Is it always so beautiful? She asked on the 3rd day as we crested a rise that revealed the sprawling valley where my ranch lay nestled against the foothills. Beautiful and harsh, I replied, guiding Luna alongside their wagon. The desert gives life, but it demands respect. Your mother understands this. She survived 19 years in a border town. Elena smiled at the compliment, her weathered hands steady on the reins. Survival is different from living, Kate. I think maybe now we learn the difference. When we arrived at the Whitehorse Ranch, my children were waiting. James had returned from checking the north pastures, Mary Rose had ridden over from the schoolhouse in town, and Thomas had come in from the horse corrals. They stood in a line on the porch, uncertainty written across their faces as they watched their mother arrive with 2 strangers and a wagon full of belongings. Little Beatrice broke from the group, first running toward me with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood. Mama, you came back. Who are these people? I climbed down from Luna and gathered my youngest daughter in my arms, drawing strength from her solid warmth. Over her head, I met James's questioning gaze and saw the wariness there, the protective instinct of a son who sensed his family was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Children, I said, setting Beatrice down but keeping her close, I want you to meet Elena and Sofia. They're going to be living with us now. The silence stretched like a taut rope until Sofia, with the boldness of youth, stepped forward. Are you my brothers and sister? She asked in careful English, then added in Spanish, Mama told me about you on the journey. Mary Rose was the first to move her teacher's instincts, recognizing a young person in need of kindness. You must be tired from the journey, she said gently. Come inside. I'll show you where you can wash up and rest. But James remained on the porch, his arms crossed his face, wearing the expression I remembered from his childhood when he was working through a difficult problem. Mama, he said quietly, we need to talk. That evening, after Elena and Sofia had been settled in the spare rooms and Beatrice had fallen asleep exhausted from the excitement of meeting new people, I sat with my 3 eldest children around the kitchen table and told them the truth about their father. All of it. The 18 years of deception, the cantina in Mesilla, the daughter who shared their blood but not their name. James took it the hardest, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally a bitter understanding. That's why he was always so nervous about money, he said. Why he never wanted to expand the ranch or invest in better breeding stock. He was supporting two families. And now, Thomas asked, his young face serious beyond his years. What happens to us now? Now we become the family we choose to be, I replied, thinking of Uncle Joseph's wisdom about rebuilding from the ashes of what came before. Elena and Sofia are not our enemies. They're victims of your father's deception just as we are. Mary Rose, ever practical, asked, how will the community react? People talk, and this arrangement, it's not conventional. Frontier communities understand survival above all else, I said. And we will survive this. We'll do more than survive, we'll thrive. Over the following weeks, our unconventional family found its rhythm. Elena proved to have a natural talent for ranch management, organizing our finances, with the same skills she'd used to run her cantina. She negotiated better prices with cattle buyers, streamlined our supply ordering, and even convinced Mexican vaqueros from neighboring ranches to help during busy seasons. Sofia threw herself into ranch life with the enthusiasm of someone finally free to be young. She learned to ride from Thomas, helped Mary Rose with the younger children at school, and spent hours at my loom, her quick fingers mastering the traditional patterns my grandmother had taught me. She has the gift, Uncle Joseph observed one evening as we watched Sofia work. He had accepted our new family members with the quiet wisdom of someone who understood that kinship came in many forms. The ancestors smile on hands that remember the old ways. 5 years have passed since that September morning when I found Sam's lies unraveling like poorly woven cloth. I sit now at my grandmother's loom in the early dawn light, my fingers moving through threads that tell new stories, patterns that speak of transformation of families built from choice rather than blood, of strength found in the most unexpected places. The desert sunrise paints the mesas in shades of gold and red, the same colors I've woven into the blanket on my loom. This piece will be a wedding gift for Sofia, now 21, and preparing to marry a good man from Esperanza, a young rancher named Miguel Santos, Father Miguel's nephew, who sees past her mixed heritage to the intelligent, capable woman she's become. Grandmother Kate, comes a small voice from the doorway, using the name my newest grandchildren have given me. Little Maria, James's youngest daughter, stands there in her nightgown, drawn by the familiar sound of the loom that has become the heartbeat of our household. Come, pequeña, I say, using the Spanish endearment that flows naturally now in our multilingual home. Help me with the final pattern. She climbs onto my lap, her small fingers learning to guide the threads as I once learned from my own grandmother. This child will grow up knowing that families can take many forms, that love is not limited by blood or law, that strength can be found in the most broken places. Elena appears in the kitchen doorway, her hair now streaked with silver, but her movements still sure and strong. At 50, she has become the anchor of our ranch operations, her sharp mind for business having increased our profits threefold. The respect she's earned in Esperanza came not from any man's name, but from her own integrity and skill. The cattle buyers from Colorado arrived last night, she reports, settling beside us with her morning coffee. They're offering top dollar for our breeding stock. Your grandmother's bloodline is gaining quite a reputation. I smile at how naturally she says our when speaking of ranch business. The transition wasn't always smooth. There were difficult conversations, hurt feelings, and moments when the weight of our complicated history threatened to pull us apart. But we persevered, bound together by something stronger than the deception that had brought us together. What are you thinking about, Kate? Elena asks, noticing my contemplative mood. I was remembering what Uncle Joseph told me before I rode to find you, I reply, my fingers never pausing in their work. He said the woman who returned from that journey would not be the same as the one who left. Elena nods, understanding, passing between us like desert wind. Were you sorry to lose that woman? I consider this as I work a silver thread into the patterned silver, like my grandmother's jewelry, like the hope that can be found even in the darkest places. No, I say finally. That woman was afraid of truth, content to live with comfortable lies. This woman knows that the greatest strength comes from facing what we fear most. Through the window, I can see Sofia and Thomas working with the horses in the morning light. She has inherited her mother's grace and her father's way with animals, but more importantly, she's learned to value honesty above comfort, truth above convenience. When the young men of Esperanza come calling, she evaluates them not by their promises but by their actions. "She's going to make a fine wife," Elena observes, following my gaze. "Miguel Santos is lucky to have found her." "And she's lucky to have found a man who sees her worth," I reply. Not all of us were so fortunate in our youth. The town of Esperanza took time to accept our unconventional arrangement, but frontier communities understand necessity above propriety. When Elena's organizational skills helped coordinate the annual harvest festival, when Sofia's quick mind made her invaluable to Mary Rose's teaching efforts, when our ranch became one of the most prosperous in the territory, even the most skeptical neighbors began to see the value of our chosen family. James, who struggled the most with his father's betrayal, has grown into a man of remarkable integrity. "You taught me," he told me recently, "that a person's character isn't determined by what happens to them, but by how they respond to what happens." Mary Rose continues teaching, but now incorporates lessons about different cultures, different ways of building families, different definitions of strength. Her students, Anglo-Mexican and Navajo children learning together, represent the future of our borderland community. Thomas has become the finest horse trainer in 3 territories, his patient methods learned from watching how we rebuilt our family with time, consistency, and respect for each individual's nature. Little Beatrice, now 12, moves easily between languages and cultures, equally comfortable helping Elena with ranch accounts and learning traditional songs from Uncle Joseph. She represents what I hope all our children will become: bridges between worlds, builders of understanding. As the sun climbs higher over the mesas, I think of all the women who will come after us, Sofia's daughters perhaps, and theirs after them. They will face their own betrayals, their own moments of choice between comfortable lies and difficult truths. But they will carry with them the knowledge that we survived, that we transformed pain into purpose, that we proved families can be built from love and choice rather than law and blood. They will know that sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. In the desert, my grandmother always said the most beautiful flowers bloom after the harshest storms. Looking around at this family we've built from the wreckage of deception, I understand her wisdom now more than ever. We are those desert flowers, and we are beautiful. It's been 10 more years since that morning when I found the silver locket in Sam's chest, and the desert has taught me that even the deepest wounds can heal if you let the wind pass through them long enough. The ranch has changed: new corrals, more horses, stronger fences, but the land still holds the same rhythm, the same heartbeat beneath its red soil. Some mornings I walk to the ridge above the river and watch the sunrise paint the mesas gold. From there, I can see almost everything we've built: the stables, the fields of alfalfa shimmering in the light, the smoke curling from the kitchen chimney. Sometimes I think the land forgave us before we ever learned to forgive ourselves. Elena and I share that understanding now without words. We've become sisters in all but blood, 2 women bound not by betrayal but by what we made from its ashes. Her silver hair glows in the dawn like the edge of a blade, and when she laughs that deep, husky laugh I once mistook for arrogance, it fills the ranch like music. Together we've turned what was once a home of ghosts into a place full of voices, laughter, and work well done. Sofia and Miguel live just beyond the cottonwoods now in a small adobe house they built themselves. She teaches at the Esperanza school 3 days a week, and in the evenings she rides out to help Thomas with the horses. When she smiles, I sometimes see both Sam and Elena in her, but more than that, I see the strength of a generation born from truth, not deception. She carries no bitterness in her, and I thank the spirits every day for that. Mary Rose has taken her teaching to the next town over, where she's helping open the territory's first bilingual school. James manages the northern pastures with his eldest son, and though he still carries the hurt of his father's lies, I've seen him soften with time. When he speaks of Sam now, there is no anger left, only a quiet acceptance, the kind a man reaches when he realizes that hate is too heavy a saddle to carry forever. Thomas remains the heart of the ranch. His horses are known across 3 territories for their steadiness, and I sometimes think he trains them the way life trained us, not with force, but with patience. Beatrice, almost grown now, rides beside him on a chestnut mare she raised herself. She says she wants to write a book someday about strong women who refuse to stay silent. I tell her she already lives that story. Uncle Joseph passed 2 winters ago under a sky full of stars. We buried him in the high valley where the sage grows thick, and on the day of his burial, the wind carried the scent of rain, a blessing in this dry land. His words still guide me. Truth is water in the desert. It may burn the tongue, but it keeps the soul alive. Sometimes in the quiet hours after dusk, I light a candle beside the old fireplace and take out the silver locket. It no longer brings pain, only remembrance. I whisper a prayer for Sam wherever his spirit may wander. He was a flawed man, but without his choices and our courage to face them, none of this new life would exist. The desert outside hums with its ancient song, the coyotes call from the hills, and the stars bloom bright over Esperanza. I think of my grandmother's saying once more, the loom remembers every hand that touched it. Yes, the desert remembers too the lies, the tears, the forgiveness, and the love that finally grew from all of it, and in that remembrance I found peace.